Hey everybody, welcome back to Football Talk with Vinny. So as you can tell by the title of this video, in today's video we're going to go over the AFC West. So this is really the 6th part of the 8-part series where I'm going to go over division by division. We're just going over team needs and the kind of cap space that each team has in the division and what their options are as far as free agents in the draft and just what their whole offseason plans are going to be like. So with that, we'll get today's video started off with the Kansas City Chiefs, obviously the Super Bowl contenders from last year. And now the Chiefs are going to be in a really tough spot. Right now, they are projected to be $23 million over the cap. And they do have a couple of free agents that they're probably not going to be able to re-sign. Some guys like Wiley, the left guard, who played significant snaps then for him, Sorensen, the safety, and then Reeder, the center. So that's 2 offensive linemen and a safety, essentially. They're probably not going to be able to re-sign either of those guys. Also, a guy like Sammy Watkins as well. But that, they have so many weapons, so you can kind of get away with not signing him. So obviously, this is kind of what the salary cap does to a lot of NFL teams. You're always in a situation where when you are towards the upper echelon of competing teams, you usually have to give some of your good players really big deals. And when you give your guys really big deals, it restricts you from signing some of your other players when they hit free agency. And this happens to more than just teams like the Chiefs, but it does happen to a lot of the good teams as well. But again, if you're the Chiefs, you probably can't re-sign any of them because, again, you're going to have to restructure some deals just to get under the cap. Now, a guy like Eric Fisher, he's actually due $15 million. He's in the last year of his deal. He's a good candidate to either be released, but again, if you release him, now you don't have a tackle, and how are you going to find one? So probably the better play there for the Chiefs is just to restructure his deal, give him a more long-term deal where you can lower the cap number in this season. And you kind of make his cap number much higher in the next coming seasons. But at least for this year, during the whole COVID situation, you're able to kind of help yourself out and build a team to compete for now, which clearly you're ready to win now. But again, there's not much for the Chiefs to do. So again, other than that, all you're really doing with restructuring is just to get under the cap. So you're cap compliant, but you're really not going to be able to sign any free agents. So that leads you to the draft. And really what you're going to do in the draft, I guess, just depends on not only who you lose, but they may make some other cuts as well. And again, at that point, if you're the Chiefs, you do have a pretty good roster. So maybe just taking the best available player, probably on the defensive side of the ball. But again, if an offensive lineman drops and falls to you, you maybe want to consider taking an O-lineman, especially considering how the Super Bowl played out. If you do decide to let Eric Fisher go and free up that $15 million, then offensive line really becomes an area of need. But if you re-sign him, right, maybe again, just best available, whether that's on the defensive side or the offensive side of the ball. So next, we're going to go into the Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos actually have $31 million of cap space, so they have pretty significant amount, but they do have Justin Simmons, who is a free agent, who they did franchise tag last year. So now he obviously is going to want some pretty big money. And then you also have a guy like Alexander Johnson, who he wasn't particularly great, but he did play almost all the snaps at linebacker. So I don't know if you want a guy like that to just walk for nothing. You're probably going to want to re-sign him back because obviously for him to play 97+% of the snaps on the defensive side of the ball, he probably was a pretty big part in the defensive scheme. But after those two guys, really the next big question for the Denver Broncos this season is, what are you going to do at quarterback? Obviously you have Drew Lock, so chances are you're probably going to move forward with him. There's not many mock drafts that have Denver taking a quarterback just because Drew Lock was such a high pick. I think if I'm Denver, you do have to consider it, right? If you either A, trade up a spot, or 2 or 3, if you're able to get one of the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks in the draft and maybe just move forward there, that's not a bad idea. Or if you do feel like you want to give Drew Lock another year or so, maybe you use that 10th pick. A lot of mock drafts have him taking a cornerback there, so you want to kind of build the defensive side of the ball. That obviously is very fair as well. And again, if you decide to move forward with Drew Lock, what do you do in free agency then? Now I think a guy like Trent Williams is a free agent. I don't know what the Niners are particularly going to do in terms of trying to re-sign him. But if he's able to hit the free agency market and you can pick him up, and if you're Denver, I think that is probably your top priority, because if you can make that offensive line really good, then if Drew Lock can improve even a little bit with the weapons that Denver has, if you can make that offensive line a little better, you could see Denver easily being a top 10 offense if Drew Lock can make a significant step up. Or again, worst case scenario is if Drew Lock shows you he's not the answer, at least you have all really the positions in place for any quarterback that comes in, and if Dallas is stupid enough not to sign Dak Prescott, if you're the Denver Broncos and next year, if Dak somehow is a free agent and you can get him on your roster with that talent, you're all of a sudden a top 5, unquestioned top 5 offense. Now, I think the other big question is, what do you do with Von Miller, right? He's in the last year of his deal. He's owed a lot of money. I believe it's like $18 million. So you have a couple options. You can, obviously, he is coming off an injury, so you can just have him play this year out and see where he's at, and then maybe decide on a long-term deal after the season. You can sign him to a long-term deal now and lower his cap number, which will give you more cap space to sign some other free agents. Or you could cut him and say, okay, you know what, guys, we're not really going to be a team that's going to compete for a playoff spot this year. So if we do release him, obviously no disrespect to Von Miller, we're just doing it to save the cap space. So maybe in a year or two, when we're ready to compete, we can use that money on a younger player that will help us compete for the more long-term. So I think if you're Denver, you have a couple options. It's really tough to see letting Von Miller walk just because of what he means to your franchise. He obviously was a very big part in getting you that Super Bowl championship 6 years ago. But again, if you want to compete for a long extended period of time, sometimes you do have to cut some of the older players and you just save that cap space to sign for some younger guys. So obviously for the Denver Broncos, there are a couple of ways they can go about it. To me, if I'm Denver, I'm probably going to just re-sign Von Miller, just sign him to a long-term deal. And then at this point, I just move forward with Drew Lock. And to me, I think my goal is to see what Drew Lock can do this year. And for me, I'm trying to position myself in a spot to where if Dak is a free agent next year, I'm trying to give him as much money as he's really asking for. Because if Drew Lock is not the answer and you're able to get a guy like Dak, I think overnight you become Super Bowl contenders if you add Dak to your roster. Or if Drew Lock can take a step up and be a fringe Pro Bowl quarterback, I think you are a playoff team, right? I think the defense is going to be good enough to where with the weapons you have in Denver, if Drew Lock can show signs of being a fringe Pro Bowl caliber quarterback, I think you can easily have a top 5 offense this year with the weapons you have and a lot of young weapons as well. And if that defense can get some stops and you have a top 5-ish offense, you can easily see Denver making the playoffs. Next, we're going to talk about the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, the Chargers, obviously, I think they are set at quarterback, so at least that's one spot, and really the biggest spot that you have figured out. They do have $23 million of cap space, but they do have some free agents. A guy like Ingram, the edge rusher, right? He's probably I would imagine first on their radar in terms of re-signing, or even just free agents in general. You probably want to bring him back. He's probably going to take up most of that $23 million. But then you also have Dan Feeney, who played a lot at center for you. So, again, I think you don't want to start being worse on the offensive line because then it could make your quarterback's job much harder. So maybe re-signing him as well, I think would be a very top priority too, along with signing Ingram. And then on top of that, you have actually 2 other offensive linemen that are going to be free agents. Guys like Forrest Lamp from the left guard, and then also your left tackle, Sammy Tevi. Not sure if I'm saying his name right. But again, that's 3 offensive linemen that you're going to have that are free agents. So if you don't re-sign any one of them, or you only re-sign one of the 3, I think offensive line, using that with that $23 million, is going to be probably the biggest area of need for the Chargers. So again, kind of the same with Denver. Signing a guy like Trent Williams, if he does hit the free agency mark, is a good idea. Also, I talked about in another video, the Carolina Panthers have 4 offensive linemen that are free agents or potential free agents. So if they don't sign a couple of those guys, maybe looking to sign some of those guys off of their team. But again, if you sign Melvin Ingram and maybe some of your offensive linemen, that's going to take up most of that $23 million of cap space. So now you're kind of just looking at what you could do in the draft. And in the draft, I think most mock drafts have the Chargers drafting an offensive lineman, right? Mostly a tackle. And I think that just makes too much sense. If the Chargers, again, you have some free agents that are going to probably leave your team on the offensive line. So you need to obviously address that by either a free agency or the draft, or probably both. Because again, having a good, strong offensive line, especially when you have a young quarterback that's as good as Justin Herbert is, you want to be able to protect him. You already have weapons, and your defense is actually pretty strong. It's really just your O-line that's kind of weak at this point. Now, if you don't decide to go O-line, maybe if one of those top 2 corners do slip to the Chargers at 12 or 13 when they pick, I think that would be a good idea, is to take a good cornerback to kind of help that back end, because obviously with Joey Bosa, and if you are to sign Ingram back, you do have a pretty strong front 7. You're able to get after the quarterback, so if you can have some guys in the secondary that can make some plays, right, you all of a sudden have an elite defense. So lastly, we're going to get into the Las Vegas Raiders. So for the offseason, they're actually minus 18 million over the cap. So again, they're in a situation most teams are in. They're going to have to restructure some deals or cut some players just to kind of get under the salary cap and just be able to kind of essentially be cap compliant. So there's not much they're going to do on the free agency side. Now, as far as free agents for them, they don't have too many guys like Denzel Good and Nelson Aguilar. So not guys that are like top priority free agents. So you probably don't really care if you lose some of those guys. And then at the quarterback spot, obviously it's pretty interesting. A guy like Derek Carr is 19 million in cap, and then Marcus Mariota actually has $11 million cap hit as well. So if you just cut bait with Marcus Mariota, you free up the 11 million. You're almost close to even at that point. And then obviously it's been a couple years now, right? So what are they going to do at the quarterback position with Derek Carr, right? There's so many rumors that, John Gruden doesn't really like Derek Carr, but he does play very well for that team. So it's kind of like, also if you're John Gruden, if you do get rid of Derek Carr, who do you replace him with? Now, obviously, a dream scenario would be you do end up making a trade for Deshaun Watson, which would be fantastic. Because now I think nobody would argue that that's a significant upgrade from Derek Carr. But if you don't get a guy like Deshaun Watson, what do? Like, are you realistically going to improve at the quarterback spot from a guy like Derek Carr? And I think that's very tough to do. I think it's a lot easier said than done. A lot of people want to move off from the guy when the guy that they have is a very good option. And again, I think in the draft, it's actually pretty simple for them. They are one of the worst teams at getting pressure and getting sacks. So definitely D-line, edge rusher, interior D-line. It's got to be in your first round pick. I mean, if you're the Raiders, I just don't see how you don't take a front seven guy with your first round pick, and particularly really the D-line, not even really linebackers. I just don't see how you can kind of ignore that position. But again, for the Raiders, like most teams, because of the cap space issue, there's not much they can do in free agency. Obviously, the quarterback position is the biggest one to really look out for. So that's going to do it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you did make it this far, make sure you hit the like button. Also subscribe. It does help the channel out. And I look forward to putting in those last two videos of this series so you can see all 32 teams. Thank you guys so much, and I look forward to it.